Hello. I want to end with a bit of heresy, and and mostly about debunking a few of the things that we always talk about at these conferences, at these web development conferences. I attended my first conference that I begged my boss to get tickets for 2004. I spoke at my first one in 2006. And since then, I've always been involved in that circuit. I speak at a lot of conferences. I help other people become speakers. I'm on boards of other conferences. And I always see the same things. And I'm not saying that we're doing a wrong job here, but I'm saying we're kind of getting very romantic about how amazing we were in the past, and we keep repeating the same things and trying to impress new people to take ownership of the web. And the web, to me, has been the revelation and the new medium that I wanted to work for. I used to work as a radio journalist. I had a job that paid. I had fun doing the news. And I realized it's great to get paid for just saying things. And then I found the internet, and I'm like, whoa, I can actually be heard by people in China. I can access the world this way, and anybody who can go on the web can do something with it. And I loved it, and I left my job, and I started building my first website. A few companies started asking me to make their website with basically a business card in HTML. And BMW asked me to build their intranet because I knew HTML. And I'm like, okay, after I had that on my CV, I finally had a career. And I thought, this is cool. So we talk about the web as this thing that is still like that time, but it has changed immensely. And I want to talk about today about how we should embrace the web for what it is, how we should protect it, and how it's up to us to keep it alive, because it was probably good to all of us already. And even accessing content or creating content or getting known, it was basically a thing that made our lives much, much better. And it's a weird thing that it now turns into something that it wasn't supposed to be, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There's one link to rule them all. All the things that I have in my talk are going to be there, bit.ly/WebView18. I'm going to tweet that out later on as well, so in case you don't need to write down all the things, I'm going to have a lot of resources in that one, because I wrote this talk half an hour ago. So I go to a lot of conferences, there's always this web development nostalgia talk where people say oh, it's so beautiful. And every single time, this is the demo. The Space Jam website. It was so amazing, and it still renders in all the modern browsers, and it rendered in all the old browsers. I've never looked at it. I don't like Looney Tunes, I don't like basketball, I had no interest in looking at that website ever. I didn't watch the movie. I know, it's shocking. And I'm always fascinated that this is the demo that people come up with, when basically on the bottom it says accessibility as a link, where it says we have no idea, please tell us if you can't use this. And this is kind of not to me what the web was. This is these throwaway websites that advertise some other medium. At that time, when the Space Jam website came out, I built things for local government where people can actually type their taxes in or get stuff picked up at their house. Not amazing, not sexy, but necessary. And that's what I found interesting about this. A lot of people got very doughy-eyed about how beautiful the web was, how rich the interactions were, but isn't it friggin' cool that I can pay when I'm in another country and I park my car the wrong way and I can pay the ticket online on some website? This is the things that I always that's the usefulness of it that makes it amazing. And of course it's great that this thing is still live, that this thing is still there. But I think there is a problem that we actually, from that we inferred what we thought was the web. And of course in the web standards community, and I was part of the WASP group, W3 groups, and these kind of things, we always talk about the web being this one cool thing. It's basically content is king. You start with content and then you mark it up. That way it's already accessible. I remember when a text-only website was a thing that people did as an accessibility measure, because HTML probably wasn't available for people who are blind, which made no sense ever, because HTML is actually structured, whereas text documents are not. And then, of course, the other thing was then links and decentralization and interchange are what makes the web. And that's still the thing. A link is a beautiful thing. I can send you something in whatever, a beacon, a message on a dog, in a poster, that basically you can click on or you can tap on or you can actually go and you go somewhere else. PWAs, being able to install an app with a link, is a wonderful, wonderful idea. The last thing we always talked about is longevity and maintainability. Good things on the web don't die. Cool links don't die. Things live forever. What you build now will not be changed in 20 years and people will love it till then. Beautiful ideas, great ideas. The resilience of the web that basically it makes it impossible for it to break. But it also makes it impossible to a degree for it to stay relevant and to stay interested to people. I'm not saying the link is a bad idea, but the sad thing about it is realities of it. I've been working for 20 years with, I was head of development at an agency, and we had like different clients every month. And every time I talked about these things to clients, because I was super excited about it, I was very militant about it as well, I realized that the reality of it was kind of different. When I talked to clients about content is king, and that was back then, the first thing everybody asked me, like, how can I protect my content from being stolen? Right-click scripts, protection scripts that says like, oh, don't download that image because it's copyrighted. I had like companies that, even in Yahoo, we had like Yahoo Music, we showed lyrics as images so people can't copy and paste the lyrics. You're like, really? But everybody was like worried about their content being stolen and somebody else making money with their content. So the whole like content is king and everybody wants to give their stuff away on the web for free was kind of never a commercial thing. Decentralization and interchange, linking to other resources was always anathema to most clients. They said, like, can we have a pop-up that says, like, do you really want to go away from the website? Can we just beg people to stay and be very much like, oh God, it's so beautiful, why aren't you leaving? It's like, look, we got a puppy for you or whatever. It's like linking out to competitors was like, oh my God, we can't do this. And you're like, well, it actually shows that you're assured enough of your content that it's good enough that you say like other people do it as well, here's the other people. And I always talk about, when I talk about DevRel, as a Microsoft guy, I'm like, why do you talk about Google stuff? And I'm like, because I can. And because I appreciate what they're doing. And I probably shame them into having to talk about my stuff that way as well. You know, the whole like sharing the information was for me never a thing, but most clients are like, I cannot link to competitors. I want to be the #1 search result, whatever, on these kind of things. And the longevity of maintainability was the biggest problem because people are like, how much will that cost? You know, like my cousin's son is 12, he has got Dreamweaver, can do it cheaper. Well, let him do it. I see you in half a year and fix the thing for 5 times the amount of money. But that was always the thing. People didn't think 10 years, 5 years ahead. They just wanted to have it as quickly as possible, as fast as possible out there. And this goes back to the Space Jam thing, that like immediacy and like things that can die really quickly. Nobody needs the Space Jam website nowadays anymore. Most movie websites are available for like half a year and then they're even 404s. News sites don't have news that are actually available more than 3 months, otherwise you have to pay for the archive to access it there. And we always talk about links don't change. So the commercial thing of the web was actually kind of what killed it very upfront to me. So once money is the goal, the problem was that the hustlers came in quite quickly. So in the case of content, the first thing was of course SEO. When Google came out and like before it, Alta Vista, Lycos, Stockpile, Hotbot, all these search engines, people like, okay, we don't want to give content. Can you like put shitloads of keywords in there that actually people are looking for that has nothing to do with my website, but I show up on the top of that? So we didn't think about structuring our content. We didn't think about copywriting. We thought about like, how can I show up on Google as the first one without having to pay Google money to be listed as an ad? With decentralization and interchange was the same thing. We had SEO and spam. As soon as you offered people to put links in your comments, you basically had spam in there. Trackback in blogging never worked for me. I blogged since 2005. The first 2 years it was cool, and then it was trackback, spam, spam, spam. No, my people don't need Cialis and Viagra, I think. So I don't want to have that next to my JavaScript blog post, but people just tried as much as they could to put it in there. And with the longevity thing, modern design was the killer of that. I loathe the word modern when it comes to technology, because you just look for like older blog posts that says like that's modern design, and you just look at it now like that's embarrassing, that's just terrible. But because modern is not even defined. How long does modern last? Like what does modern mean? But every time we had a new thing like coming from print design that like, oh, you need to do this on the web, you need to do this on the web to be modern now, and that basically had that longevity thing sorted. So the open web to me is an amazing idea and a gift. But it's like pure digital socialism if you think about it. You give out things that end users can do whatever they want with. They can copy it, they can print it out, they can actually stitch it onto a carpet and walk around on it. You cannot do anything, you cannot prevent people from using your stuff in other ways. But that's great because it actually means that people who need different ways of like listening to your things or needing bigger fonts or having to turn it into another language can do it. But the problem is that like in a world where actually you have to make money, it doesn't fit the culture and the current ideals of what we do. From the very beginning, all the clients that I talked to wanted to make websites to make money, like e-commerce or like selling their stuff online and finding things out. And we as the web community were always like, yeah, those are terrible people. We don't talk to those. They don't think about the cool thing. There's a great talk at a games conference about the Flash community and the Flash gaming community and the indie Flash gaming community. And they all were talking about like, we know in 2 weeks nobody's going to play our game anymore. We just put random things together. But from the very beginning, they thought like, how do I make money with this? I'm a student, I actually want to finance my high school or university, whatever, and I want to make games with that and do that. On the web, we never thought about that. We always saw it as a dirty aftermath idea of like, somehow we have to make money with it. Probably somebody's going to sponsor us. And the business model of like putting ads all over the shit on the web is not really making money. It's really hard to protect your stuff and the work that you've done and put it online and not have like spammers put it on other blogs and make more money with it because they put ads around it. So we always talk about the concept of great web products start with great content. And that's true, because if your content is already web ready or is good copywriting, is good materials, good imagery, good videos, you already have something that will SEO-wise show up quite nicely. The only problem with it is that most clients never had that stuff for us. We always had to do it for them. I remember I worked for McDonald's, McDonald's.co.uk. I was the lead engineer of that for a few years. They sent us their print posters every month. That's our print campaign this month. Do something on the website that's similar. You're like, that makes no sense, but okay. They paid money, fine. They didn't need a website. They basically had one because Burger King had one. They just basically, they didn't want to get contacted because everybody who contacted McDonald's was basically abusing them. It was an 8-step process to send them an email on the website by design. And I was just standing there, why do you have this thing? Oh, you pay me money, fine. Instead of focusing on content, we kind of got distracted. And we never had, and even now, we actually never have content. We built content management systems for people to write the content later on. So when it comes to like semantic HTML, that's tricky because we never know what the stuff is going to be. We just make systems for people to create content, and they undo that then by turning on a what you see is what you get editor and write random crap in there, or put like font tags in there because they learned that on, I don't know, GeoCities in 1997. So these are things that clients heard louder than our messages, and I want you to suffer with me here. So if you heard one of those, please groan. And these are actually timed. That's a timeline. So I realize how long you've been on the web by the groaning when you actually start being part of it. And I heard these over and over from like salespeople of competitors or my own salespeople of my company going to clients and say these things. Instead of like, write good content, we're going to make you semantic HTML, links, and everybody's going to love the web. Pop-up windows make sure visitors remember you. Everybody needs a DHTML multi-level drop-down menu. Newsletters and feeds bring repeat visitors. Flash channels are what makes a website. You need a mobile version, WML or iMode, and an m.star.com version. Carousels make for great conversion numbers. Great Singapore. Yahoo Singapore had a carousel with carousels inside it. It was great. Parallax scrolling is pure delight. Auto-playing videos give you eyeballs. Interstitials allow you to monetize. You should have an app. A website is a great way to advertise it. Notifications are a great way to keep users up to date about offers and get them to come back. This is the cool new thing, isn't it? Like notifications, every website. Well, it's hardly finished loading, and I didn't even look at the content and ask you, can I send you notifications? You know, just buy me a drink first. What the fuck, you know? And these are the things that people paid money for. These are the things that they wanted. I had a DHTML JavaScript drop-down menu that worked in Netscape 4 and Internet Explorer 5 and 4, and I charged £300 for it to use. 50 lines of JavaScript, and people paid that. And I felt dirty, but I felt rich. Well, I sold 4 of them. I didn't feel rich. But so whilst we reveled in nostalgia, things went to pot. The web became this terrible thing, full of these carousels and full of these horrible things that end users have no benefit from, but somebody can actually measure the click-through ratio and what it means, and like, oh look, 5 people liked it. What? So the mainstream web right now is not fun to use. It's slow, and it's basically showing you things that you don't go. I mean, Ethan probably showed some of that stuff. You go to a news site, you want to have that article, and you get all the stuff around it. Like, oh yeah, I want to know about puppies. Do you want to know about the new Ford car, whatever, that you're never going to buy? I'm going to show you a full ad video playing kind of thing and ask you to please sign up for the newsletter for the Ford car that you didn't want to have. The average website is, I think it's like 3 meg by now, with like 117 resources or something like that. And you're like, this is just amazing how much people who care about the web are disconnected from the people who maintain the web, who actually put the stuff out there. Because we were reveling in nostalgia and we're like, we can do that better. We just don't want to fix these things because we don't talk to them. They don't go to conferences. So we created quite a mess. And especially, I think that by now, with like the infrastructure that we have, with like build scripts and with like JavaScript libraries and these kind of things, the web has kind of become a render target amongst many others. Like we build a website and we build an app and we build this and we build the other thing, and VR environment is now the cool new thing, or something blockchain. I don't know what it means, but something. You know, so the web is just this like, yeah, we render this out as well, but actually we make money with apps. Nobody makes money with apps, but that doesn't matter. That's the new hype. Releasing often and developer convenience trumps the semantics and the performance of the final product. We actually want to release all the things new all the time, and what gets spit out, it doesn't matter because the end users have great browsers that actually fix these things for you. So making it easy for us as developers is much more important than making it easy for the end user to consume the thing. Websites are slow and huge because we work on fast computers and good connections. Like we never take out the 3G phone, or disconnect it here because your phone system is weird in Canada, but we never try it on a phone or a really old one and wonder what our end users are going to suffer because, oh, this machine, it looks good. There was a talk the other day by Charlie Owen at the State of the Browser in London, and she was trying to sell like the history, and I love it to bits, I'm not saying this is bad. I was just saying like our history, what the remember of the past, we always try to actually make look better. And she was saying like when the first iPhone came out, we thought much more about HTML and things again because we wanted to make them work for the iPhone. And I'm like, no, I remember it differently. I remember everybody saying like, you got to have an iPhone interface right now that is in HTML. That on a desktop, I all of a sudden had a button this big that basically was optimized for an iPhone, but not for everything on the web anymore. So we tried to build things for the iPhone itself. Being a web expert is less exciting than being a full-stack developer, and I still call bullshit on the term full-stack developer. I spent 20 years on this web in security, in performance, in writing JavaScript engines, and I know for a fact that I don't want to maintain a server and keep it secure. Just setting up a node server and have an HTTP server out there does not mean you're protected against spam. You really, really have to look after your end users and protect them with the things that needs to be done from the server to the end thing. When people rant about CSS being terrible because they just want to look at it, it makes no sense to me. Like, you don't need to understand the whole stack. It's actually underselling our value as craftspeople and people who care about our job if we say we do everything fine. Like, you go to any other shop and you go like, you have a plumber in your house that fixes your plumbing, and you're like, can you go on the roof and fix the shingles as well? Not gonna do that. But we're like, yeah, sure, it's software, everything is the same. It's JavaScript from beginning to end. No, it's not. The problem was, to a degree, when I work on browsers and when I worked on environments, we always needed to be forgiving to keep that dream of the web, the open web, kind of alive. Anyone is allowed to write code for the web and use whatever they want to create that code. And that's the great thing about the web. That is what democratized software. This is what made it amazing. But it also means that people can put all kind of terrible stuff on the web, and we kind of have to show it. We kind of make sure that it actually works. Now we have the big problem that a lot of content is locked in Flash files, and we write like converters from Flash to JavaScript to render that content somehow again, because otherwise it gets lost. Whatever goes wrong, it's not the fault of the developer. It's the fault of the browser, or the operating system, or because it's like the connection is slow or something like that. The amount of people that complain like, oh, this doesn't work in that browser because I only optimized for that browser that is on my machine, you're like, duh. You know, like, you have no control over your end user's device. You have no right to tell the user you need that browser to access that content when you made the commitment to say we put it on the web. Users shouldn't suffer from developer errors. That's the great thing about HTML and CSS. They're both forgiving. In CSS, if I make a line with a syntax error, it says, jumps to the next one. If a JavaScript has a syntax error in one line, it's the end of the world. I don't want to play with you anymore. I'm going in the corner and get drunk. Legacy products will never get fixed. I work for Microsoft. In my job interview, they asked me, what do you want to do here? And I'm like, kill Internet Explorer. And I still work with customers. Then you learn that people in government have like computers, that 40,000 computers that they cannot upgrade and they don't get a new operating system. You learn that every ATM runs on Windows 2000 and you just want to go into goat farming or something and just give up. But as maintainers of browsers and as people, you never can break the web, because that would make our whole work of the 20 years would negate it and say like, well, the web didn't work, see? And you're like, no, I want it to work. And that's why I put crap in the browser to make sure. When we created Edge, we threw out all the stuff that Internet Explorer needed, that only Internet Explorer needed. And oh my God, it was so nice to see the engineers delete 270,000 lines of code that are not needed anymore. They were so happy. We didn't even have to get them beers. They were just like, oh God, I'm gonna do good things now. I'm gonna be a great person for the next 10 days. And then we looked at the web, we put it on the web, and nothing rendered right. And then we had to put like WebKit preference things in the CSS, and we had to do things that Opera did wrong and Chrome did wrong, and we had to simulate the errors of all the other browsers, so our browser is not the one that shows it wrong. Because again, it's like we write terrible code and then we complain that the browser doesn't do it right. Netscape 6 was the first one to do it. It was supporting the DOM and CSS properly in that time. And everybody hated it because everything looked wrong. And you're like, yes, because you wrote it wrong. Because you did table layouts and these kind of things that weren't meant to be the way they do it. So we have years of technical debt that kind of makes the web, for new people, like, oh, I'm not going to touch that. I don't want to care about browser interoperability. I just want to build an app. I don't want to think about that, what the end user has. And it's terrible to a degree how much we accumulated of that and how hard it is to get users to actually abandon outdated technology, and we haven't got a right to do it. So is the open web still a thing to care about? Is it still something that, as an engineer that just starts out, do you really want to care about this? And I think, yeah, and it's because of nefarious and sinister reasons. Because the biggest problem that I see that we're having right now, and I talk a lot about this in like environments that are not technical, is that on the web we had visitors. I never liked the term user on the web. I said visitors. You have to do something to make it exciting for people to come to your product and use it, and stay there and do something with it, and that's great. That's basically, you offer something on the web to the unknown audience that will come and use your thing. And these were visitors, and this is what I liked. Then we started to actually go into users. User-generated content. We don't have any content on our websites. We all built a social network that people will put stuff in. When you think about it, Facebook and others are just magic. They don't have to do anything useful. We provide all the content for them, and they actually make money with it. It's just clever to actually make sure that people have to go there because their family is there or their friends are there, and getting them actually to use it. We started not creating content for the web. We created content management systems. We created social networks. We created things where people uploaded things, and these were users to me. These were not visitors anymore because we didn't even offer anything. The user became part of the content. And nowadays, we're actually creating addicts. And that's the real problem. That's like, people are dependent on these things like Facebook and Twitter. And I gave a talk about this at a TED conference a few years ago about how we make up this persona online, and then we get frustrated because our life is not as amazing as the life that we invented. And people are basically addicted to updates. They're addicted to, like, instead of, I'm going to write a blog post, I'm going to tell the world about what I do, or I find some code thing and I write something about it. No, I'm going to start a thread on Stack Overflow so I can get the karma points, or I'm actually going to put it on GitHub so I can get some stars, or I'm actually going to put it on Twitter and let people abuse me and tell me about their political ideas. I don't know. But there's a great post down there that actually talks about the UX need nowadays to stop that addiction from being a real problem. That, like, we are not becoming maintainers of the web or like publishers on the web, but becoming blind consumers of stuff that gets thrown at us, and we press the like button and we press the share button instead of doing something else. And this is where nefarious people can change your political views, can actually make sure that you stay in that system. It's all a lock-in, and that's what I think is where the open web is still the thing to fight against that. But the open web is kind of under attack. Not kind of, it's very much under attack. Legislation in Europe just had a big copyright law that you're actually not allowed to link anything more than one word from a headline from a news site from your website without having to pay for copyright. That makes no freaking sense, except for the people who have the copyright on that article. The other thing is that everybody who allows somebody to upload something has to check it for copyright reasons before it gets uploaded to the system and shows up on the website. Which I like in terms of illegal content. Like I talked about that in my EI talk, that like some things should not be on the web. But basically, somebody like YouTube that uploads like thousands of videos every second on the internet, having to check all of them for copyright before they get uploaded, that's technically right now not possible. But it's an interesting law that actually protected the people that don't understand that copyright is kind of has to change as well. But it doesn't, because we got Disney and Mickey Mouse. In America, we got FCC. We got the FCC doing the net neutrality thing, and I love the wording of it. It says like FCC takes action to restore internet freedom. No, you're actually messing with internet freedom because you make sure that only rich people can get a fast internet and content, and poor people don't get it. But what the freedom here means is that the government doesn't interfere with the internet, and only corporate companies can actually control whatever. And it just drives me crazy that this thing has been going through, and it becomes, the arguments that it's not working are becoming more silent and silent, and people are like, yeah, fine, we don't understand it. Probably the government does the right thing there, and of course it's going to be better if it's privatized. No. This morning, the Trump administration is suing California for net neutrality. Because California was like, you know what, this is stupid. We're all IT companies. We basically want to make sure that people have the freedom and everybody can have access to the internet. I love that in Sweden you get 100 megabit up and down from the government because internet access is a citizen right. I mean, how cool is that? How much of an education system can you build on having everybody online instead of having to afford to be online? But that the administration is suing, what if it states, I just don't understand it. The other problem of the web is that it's attacked by sharks, of course. It's true, they chew on the cables, so it all comes down to sharks. And I love that when luminaries of the web, like former Google chief predicts the internet would split by 2028, a Chinese web and an American one. And I'm scared shitless about this I mean, just of like, oh, there's only an American internet, really? Like, I haven't done any work for the last 20 years, you know, like, it was not invented in Switzerland like it was, for example, or these kind of things. It's just, but he's right. It's like the commercial internet, the consumption internet is basically ruled by these two markets at the moment. And the Chinese market is scary. They just shut down thousands of websites in a cleanup campaign that might be content that they don't want to see on the internet. And if you really want to get scared, look at the 2020 proposal that they have where everybody is actually monitored 24/7 by the government and actually has like a karma score, more or less, what they do in their day-to-day life to get allowed access to content and not content in real life as well. So that's a really worrying thing. Now there are some interesting attempts to reboot the web. People think, okay, it's already so commercialized, there's no way we can go back to these old ideas of the internet, so let's reboot it. The DAT protocol and the beaker browser is a very interesting one, that actually everybody who's going on the web is also becoming a publisher and sharing part of their operating system or file system and create an MD file and publish it on the web that way. Peer-to-peer works, BitTorrent shows that. I mean, Spotify grew as fast as it was because everybody's Spotify client up front was also a BitTorrent client that shared the music with other people. That's why it was so fast and so nice to listen to, or even on a slow connection. So that's a very interesting way to try to break that model. And actually, Tim Berners-Lee just announced that he started a startup, began with a startup, no, anyways, called Inrupt. Based on the Solid protocol, which is a W3C proposal by him as well, to actually rethink the web and the data that you have on the web is yours to own. Great idea, very interesting. Technically, maybe a bit too challenging at the moment, so people might not embrace it as much as they embrace following Kanye West on Twitter. But I think it's an interesting proposal to see these kind of things. That the main format is RDFA is kind of painful. But we're getting there. But I don't think everything is lost yet. I don't think the web is just this commercial, terrible entity that we don't have a chance as indie publishers to still play in and do something with. But I think we need to change our approach to web quality. Because the web, to me, is now ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Everything runs on the web. Everything is kind of web-enabled. And when we still talk to people about, like, you should use your P tags and your H tags, and you should make sure that it's XHTML validating or something, we're kind of not reaching people that way anymore. We got to make sure that we're more telling them about, like, here's 20 years of knowledge that we accumulated how to make a good web product. And you should use those, but not by pointing them to resources to make them read, but actually bring it much more to the work that we do day to day. So when people talk to me what a browser is, and they say, like, you should render according to standards and you should actually be fast. That's like 10% of what browsers need to do nowadays, because a browser is your online identity. It has all the things that you're doing online. You need to show web and multimedia content fast and reliably. And most of the JPEGs and images and videos that I see on the web are malformed. And we still have to show something in the browser, because otherwise it's the browser's fault again. It has to give access to the web regardless of ability. We have to make sure that, like, assistive technology gets supported by the browser. We have to assure that you can resize the fonts and you can turn off animations and you can make things slower if you have issues with anxiety. We have to fix all these things for the humans out there. We have to keep users safe by blocking unsafe content and patch attack vectors. And the web is the most attacked platform I know. We have to remember users' history and access credentials, or remember nothing. It's great on a mobile phone that I can say see, and it has Christian Heilmann and my telephone number and my credit card to fill out a form rather than having to fill them all out on my mobile phone. But at the same time, I don't want some random JavaScript in an ad to have access to that same content by creating a hidden field and then pasting something in and then finding out that the autocomplete sets the things in there as well. It has to allow for detailed customization, including extensibility. People love to write extensions for their browsers, and every single one of them is an attack vector. That's the scary bit about it. And it has to sync content across a range of devices. I want on my mobile phone to have the same history that I have on my desktop. Okay, first world problem. Not everybody has a mobile phone and a desktop, but it should be something the browser does for me. So for us as web developers, it's actually not to only know HTML and CSS and what the P tag is different from a link element, but we have to know a lot of stuff. We have to know performance. We have to make sure that the stuff, no matter what we put in there, is fast for our end users. We have to know accessibility. We have to know interoperability. We have to know which browser messes up in what way. And that used to be a big knowledge thing that made sure you had a job as a web developer. Security, we need to know what we do might be a problem. Like, I mean, I see like tutorials, PHP tutorials years ago, just chmod 777 that folder and everybody can use it. Maintainability, how will the next developer look at the stuff that you just wrote and is it readable? And then we also need to know the browser quirks, we need to know the developer tool chains, like are you using Vue, are you using React, are you using that, Gulp, Broccoli, whatever you want to do. Browser developer tools are different from browser to browser. Which one are you going to use? You want to debug something in Safari, it looks completely different to what it was in Chrome or whatever. Abstraction libraries, Vue, React, all these things make us cool. The command line interface, it always cracks me up when people are like, you got to know Unix commands if you want to do CSS. What? But it's a thing we assume nowadays. And editors to actually find the right editor to use. So where do you learn all that? Do you learn it by standards documentation? Well, have you ever read an RFC of the W3C? If you suffer from insomnia, it's a great thing. But they have to be written that way because they have to be perfect, to the point, and explaining what's going on. Browser vendor docs, they might be tainted. Say like, oh, for Safari you do this, for Chrome you do this, for Firefox you do this, for Edge you probably have a Mac so you don't do anything. Conferences, not everybody can afford them. Books, they're outdated by the time you print them. Workshops, they're expensive again, so not everybody can access them. Developer tools, yeah, cool, they're there, but they get complex as well. I look at some of the Chrome developer tools, and I'm like, I have no idea what those things are. I never used them. News channels, kind of like, again, the most coolest thing gets upvoted, and the real news is normally buried somewhere else. I gave up kind of like going to Stack Overflow and help people because I always want to help people by teaching them how to learn it themselves. And then I get upvoted by the buyer that says like, just use jQuery and works. So the obstacles to learning to me is that we have upvoting options on news things, and that favor the how over the why. They say like, do this and it works, copy and paste it, full Stack Overflow development, instead of understanding why it actually works and what it does. We're not paid to learn, we're paid to deliver. We're actually paid to build things, and like trying to go into on a conference or something like that is still seen as a disruption to our day-to-day deliveries. Peer pressure makes developers who don't know things afraid to admit it. That's why I never go to an audience and say like, who knows about this? And of course everybody puts their hand up, though they have no idea what it is, but they don't want to be seen as the person at an expert conference to not know it. That's why I make mistakes deliberately on stage. In interviews, I make mistakes because I want people to call me out and say like, actually that's not true. Because they do have to do that in day-to-day development work as well. So be afraid if I interview you. There's always a good enough way to create a lot in a short amount of time. There's like, okay, here's the template, here's the RxAS thing, click this, and it creates the boilerplate for you, and everything is good. It's also 15 meg of JavaScript for a hello world, but yeah, fuck it, users will be fine. So we already have great resources, so what's the issue? The developer.mozilla.org is the place to learn anything about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript because it's maintained not by Mozilla, but by all the other vendors. Like Google has writers there, Microsoft has writers there, Adobe has writers there, Apple has writers there. Everybody realized this is where people go, so we support that instead of maintaining our own documentation. CanIUse.com tells you what browsers can do and how they fail and what to do to actually fix it. And the front-end checklist I/O, which the person maintaining it is here, so talk to him and buy him a beer or whatever, cookies later, is another great thing to actually test something and make something with it. The problem with some of the current tools is that they actually have too many promises. This tool makes so easy, no need to look it up. It's very easy to like, I mean, we had all these CSS frameworks that like, you don't need to know how CSS works with this one, it just does it, put that class in there and you'll be fine. The huge corp uses that configuration and toolchain. If it works for their needs, it should rock for yours too. And using this configuration optimizes for the modern web. Again, that lie. And then of course we have too many rules and barriers. Opinionated tools demand you to fix things that don't apply to your product. Some tools say like, okay, you gotta have a manifest, and I'm like, I'm building an intranet site for room booking in our company. It's never going to be installed by anybody's computer because it's only available behind a firewall, so I should not be punished by not having this as part of my tool. Dependencies in complex tool chains can be daunting, like npm install, and you get like 500 lines of like random warnings, and none of them are a problem apparently. It's kind of weird. Best practices often don't get updates and they're contextual. So it's great for a mobile website on Android to do this, but that doesn't mean that it's actually applying to a website that is supposed to be on a desktop in an office environment. And having to follow strict rules without understanding them is not fun. It's like, this is because you have to do it. And I'm like, why? Because it has to do like that. Why? It doesn't work that way. So we all had these issues in my company right now as well. Microsoft is a company that is a web company, and I think we've come that way. But we have like third-party products that build stuff for us that is horrible. And it's embarrassing for us to see these things online. And some of our engineers come from like C++ and you write CSS and copy and paste it from somewhere else, and they don't know what's going on, and say like, well, it's out there, so fine, it's good. So we wanted to make sure we actually have an action that makes it easier for people to build things the right way without having to know the right way. So we thought about, well, how about we get customizable best practices in context rather than just have best practices on the web that you should follow. So having information isn't enough for people when they don't go there. They don't go to MDMN, they don't know what caniuse.com is. It doesn't make sense that we have a best practice that people don't read before they implement things. We need to prevent mistakes before they happen, and we need to allow people to customize these experiences. Again, an internet site needs different settings than a marketing site that can be thrown away in a month's time. So I thought the best thing was to target editors and build processes. And I love that every editor nowadays, in this case Visual Studio Code, but also Atom and others as well, have linting and insights in the editor itself. So while I'm writing things, I get a squiggly line under it saying like, this is stupid, don't do this. And I love that. Instead of writing the code and then go into a debugging process and find out in the debugging that I made a mistake, I'm prevented from making stupid things. This is good. It's hurtful at times when your linting is not set up properly or too strict, but it actually makes sense to not write stupid code. So I want to talk today about Webhint.io, and this is not a sales pitch. Well, to a degree it is, because we created that thing, we gave it to the JavaScript Foundation. It's not a Microsoft product, and it allows us to do all the things. We built it for ourselves, for the third-party problem and for the internal website problem, to make sure that we get better quality out of it. I got stickers too, so it's a real product. So what you do with Webhint.io, you can go there and you enter a URL, example.com, which should be without errors, right? Wrong. And then you get a report. And it checks it for accessibility problems, it checks it for interoperability problems, for performance problems, for PWA issues, and for security issues. Some of those are based on third-party software, like Sneak for security and Xcore for accessibility. And then when you click through them, you get the explanation why it is a problem, what is the problem, and why it's a problem. And you can even get more detailed explanation how to fix it and why the issue is there. So instead of just saying like, that's wrong, fix it, you know why, and you learn it. The more you actually use that tool, the less you make these mistakes in the future. And of course, having a website is pretty cool for that. You can go to a website and put that in there, but we don't build HTML standard HTML flat files any longer. No, most of the time we build something with a deployment chain, with a continuous integration chain. So Webhint is node-based and an NPM module. So you can just do npm install hint, and you can run it on the command line. And that way you can also make it part of your rollout of your deployment script. So instead of like saying like we deploy it and then we go through debugging afterwards, you just during deployment you already see these are the 5 things that are wrong, can you fix them first to go through it without having to write these tests yourself. And this is content of 16, 17 years of knowledge of 8, 9 different companies that we put into this tool that you don't need to know about anymore. We just see why it's a problem and get explanations to fix it. So node-based, it's built deployment process, and you can also give detailed information about the setup of your bundler and preprocessor. So if you use your Webpack or you use your Grunt or whatever you use, and you use it wrongly, it tells you like this generates 15 meg of JavaScript. You only need 3 meg if you actually only want to target these browsers as you defined in your config file. So we actually made sure that people just don't throw the kitchen sink on the web and hope that everything works out. So you can do hint example.com once you have it as an NPM module, and it goes through the HTTP, traverses it, finds the errors, and gives you a report in the command line. Or you can say, create an HTML document, create an Excel file, create XML, whatever other formats we have in there. All of this is customizable, so you can actually write your own renderers to get the results back as well. Out of the box, you got hints on performance, accessibility, PWA readiness, developer environment setup, interoperability, what is different between different browsers, and security. But you can customize it any way you want. So if you don't need the PWA stuff for your intranet site, turn it off. So you never have that annoying error message that is not an error message anymore. And you can develop your own hints that are dependent. We have, for example, an internal accessibility scanning tool that is not the Xcore, that is much more hardcore than it. So we built that one when we build internal websites. We run it through that one. Or if you're behind a firewall and you cannot use Sneak third-party providers or something, you can turn that off and point it to your own security scripts. That's not a problem at all. You can define and adding your own hints by just doing an npm install on that. So you say npm install hint, and then it asks you, do you want this kind of hint to do this? It's a yes and no process. So it's a bit like Heilmann used to be for your setups. It's the kind of like, instead of having to know the syntax of the JSON object of a hint, you can actually do it with a yes-no thing, and then it created a hint for you. So I like that because it prevents people to make errors on the build process and on the deployment, and also if you just want to get a report to an end user or to a third party that says like, this website is great, and you're like, according to our report it isn't. Here's the 5 things to fix, and here's how to fix them. And that shut up people quite nicely. It's wonderful to actually, people make them care about the web that way. We also have a code extension, so when you're in code and you basically type your HTML, it tells you, okay, UTF-8 here should be further up in the header, or your settings on your manifest file are not right, or in this case, you've got a tsconfig and you're trying to target the browsers, but you're still generating ES3 code, which is unnecessary. So all these things are happening now in the browser, in the editor, while you type that code in. And this is annoying the first time you use it, but the more you use it, the less you make these mistakes. And you never ever have the embarrassment of something breaking in the browser because you didn't release that code yet. It told it up front what went wrong. You can create valid app manifests that way. You can fix your tooling setup, and you also know if you create inaccessible content. So an alt text is necessary for that image, it's not there. So it tells you these kind of things directly in context as well. And I think these insights should be a great start. These like 20 years of knowledge of the web, of best practices that we now, instead of just pointing people, you should read these kind of things, we just make it part of the day-to-day development environment. I think is much more powerful than saying like, oh, you can create great things if you use these 5 modules. By putting the knowledge that we accumulated into the environments where people build things, we prevent them from making stupid mistakes that we made, and we learned our best practices by making these mistakes. So we accumulate a lot of great knowledge on how to do web the right way, and instead of reiterating this knowledge and hope people get it, we can use it as a base to start from. When people are like, how do I become a web developer? And you're like, well, okay, you can start with a text editor in the browser, or I can install Visual Studio Code for you with that extension, and you already know when something is wrong while you do it. And this is not a bad thing. I'm doing a lot of courses on people that start on the web right now, and I started with the linting things, and they're like, oh, now I know why it's a problem, not like it is a problem. And that's a much better way to actually get the next round of developers to be creative with the web and do things that we haven't thought of because we got bogged down with like, that is wrong, that is wrong, that is a best practice. I want you to be creative. The Flash community was great because they broke all barriers. They said like, I don't care what you do on the web, I can do this in Flash. And we can do the same thing on the web if we actually make sure that people build things that work. And then they can be creative on top of that, rather than like saying like, we got to be different than you because we hate what you do and you're holding the web back. So our technology stack has evolved from a text editor, a terrible browser, to amazing open tools. All of this stuff is Creative Commons. All of this stuff is open source. It's on GitHub. You can be part of it. You can access it. You can fork it. You can leave it on your own computer and only play with it there. I don't care. And it's part of the JS Foundation, so even if Microsoft doesn't get any funding for it anymore, or other people don't want to be part of it, Samsung already put a few pull requests in, and other people are actually working with it on that thing already. So let's introduce new people to the web, to those things early on as part of the development setup, instead of saying like, oh, anybody can be on the web. Yeah, but they also can write a lot of terrible code. So our knowledge getting into the development stack is, I think, more important than our knowledge being like, go to this blog post from Chris from 2007 and it's exciting. No, it shouldn't have to be. You shouldn't have to go back in time to actually learn what you're supposed to be doing right now. So I think we shouldn't mourn the ashes of the web, but we should hand over the spark that made us so excited about it. And I think by setting people up the right way, not to make mistakes while they're coding it, is a great way to do that. And that's all I had, so thanks very much.